Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to rise and join the debate today on Bill 235, an act respecting energy retailers, an act to enact the Energy Consumer Protection Act of 2009 and to amend other acts as well. Since I was first elected in 2007, I've received countless visits and phone calls from my constituents regarding energy retailers. Many of these retailers will be affected by this bill. In fact, my constituency office in Sarnia is often spending hours out of their day assisting the people of Sarnia-Lambton in regards to energy contracts that they have signed at their home and at the door. Recently, I wrote a column that appeared in one of our local periodicals, a weekly, and it was titled, "Do you know who's knocking at your door?" And in it, I went into I listed a number of issues that we our concerns in Sarnia-Lambton. I won't go into them today. Many of the members in this House have heard me speak about them, I won't say ad nauseum, but at length from time to time. And I won't say what they are. They don't have anything to do with this energy bill. But each week, I quoted myself here, each week without fail, my office in Sarnia receives phone calls, letters, and visits in regards to the occasional dodgy business practices and, frankly, unfair contracts which have been signed with door-to-door energy retailers. Many of us know these, quote, energy retailers as their agents have knocked at our doors and asked to see our energy bills, almost always promising a better deal. I've heard from many accounts from constituents who are under the false impression, Mr. Speaker, that these agents arrived at their door representing these local energy utilities, such as Union Gas or Blue Water Power, which was not the case. These energy retailers offered, quote, flat rate plans and, quote, price protection, which would stabilize my constituents' energy rates for a specific period. However, they weren't always such a good deal. In fact, Mr. Speaker, it was often found that after the fact, when these constituents would present themselves at my office, that they had been, in fact, locked into 3- or 5-year plans at rates which would force them to pay up to twice as much as they would have been charged by the standard local utility. Moreover, Mr. Speaker, what they don't tell you is that when you go to attempt to cancel a contract, you could be penalized with a cancellation fee of up to $1,500 or more. Our office worked with a number of these constituents to reverse these contracts and to remedy these situations. That's why I am pleased, Mr. Speaker, to rise today after many years of pushing this government to act. The government has finally agreed to introduce a bill which will significantly change how energy retailers do business in this province. Mr. Speaker, though this bill is more than 2 years overdue, it would prohibit many of the current unfair practices taking place. It would simplify the wording in energy contracts and set down firm rules regarding your ability to cancel contracts with the retailer, and it's about time. In fact, Mr. Speaker, I am confident when I say that I know there's not a single member of this House who hasn't had some contact with a consumer who has a horror story to tell about an energy retailer or their representative of an energy retailer who has come to their door and thereafter the constituents have come to their office. In fact, in many cases, they can absolutely prove that there was a misrepresentation on the part of that agent, Mr. Speaker, which makes it quite clear that it is about time that something was done about this. Whenever, Mr. Speaker, there is an environment in sales where people are going to the door and are clearly misrepresenting themselves by saying things that they have no right to say or promising things that are completely untrue, it must be stopped. Mr. Speaker, however, at the same time, while I do support the reason behind bringing forth this legislation to protect consumers, I'm a little concerned about the way it's been done. Mr. Speaker, in fact, from what I recall, this bill seems awfully similar to a private member's bill brought forth by the member from David Ramsey great member, in November 2008, Temiskaming. The member for Temiskaming, apologize. So I ask, if this government believes that protecting consumers is a good idea today, why wasn't it a good idea in November of 2008? Just a thought. Mr. Speaker, as my caucus colleague, our energy critic, has previously stated, quote, the expose that was presented on CBC's Marketplace early in 2009 was obviously a wake-up call for this government and for anybody who does not think there were problems going on in the energy retailing business. Mr. Speaker, these problems needed to be addressed, And Mr. Speaker, I believe that Mr. Ramsey's bill partially would have done that over a year ago. So I think they're a little late to the game. Mr. Speaker, so I guess my question is, why did the Ministry of Energy at that time, Minister Smitherman, take so long to react and bring in a piece of obviously good legislation that should have been done a long time ago? Mr. Speaker, now there is clearly a need for this protection, but there are definitely some issues with this legislation as well. The member for Timiskaming's bill would have prohibited retailers from entering into contracts with consumers other than those whose names appear on a bill. It would have required the retailer to provide a written copy of the contract and a reaffirmation letter with specific required information, including the price to be paid with the retailer versus the utility. And Mr. Speaker, also state clearly the terms of the contract and other relevant information. Mr. Speaker, the bill also made it quite clear that he had reached out not only to us, but to members of the third party, and also to industry representatives like the Ontario Energy Association, and discovered many ways as to improve the bill. I am worried that in the drafting of this bill that the same consultations have not been done, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, moreover, I worry about the place that the Ontario Energy Board has been put in place with this bill. If you want to ensure that there's protection, and I support the premise behind the legislation, absolutely, but why has the Ontario Energy Board been pushed to the back burner? Mr. Speaker, we already have an Ontario Energy Board which could have been given more teeth for enforcement, but instead it seems that this bill largely avoids working with them. Mr. Speaker, what I can agree with is this. Will the energy consumer be better off at the end of the day when this legislation is passed than before? Absolutely. Absolutely, the energy consumer, the customer at the door, my constituent, your constituents, is going to be better off. Mr. Speaker, we've been encouraging the government to bring forth such legislation that would do just that. Mr. Speaker, but at the same time, my concerns with the positioning of the Ontario Energy Board and the government's, again, seemingly lack of consultation with the major players involved in this industry still stand. And again, I ask, if this government believes that protecting consumers is a good idea today, in April of 2010, why wasn't it a good idea in November of 2008? Mr. Speaker, by the time this bill is implemented, I would ask the members watching today and the audience, ask yourself, how many consumers and constituents of ours would have been protected over the last year and a half? And if the government had acted in the autumn of 2008, rather than sitting on their hands for over a year. Thank you again, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to rise and speak in support of this bill.
Great. Questions and comments?